Welcome to Hot Topics on the Edge of NFT. I'm Richard Carthon, and I'm here with my co-host, Josh Krieger. And today we are joined by special guest, Josh Lawler from Lawler. Josh Lawler specializes in mergers and acquisitions and securities law, focusing on emerging industries like distributed ledger technology.
Yeah, we're very excited to partner with Lawler on this special sponsor edition of Hot Topics, where we get to hear his perspective on the edge of blockchain law when it comes to NFT copyright issues, as well as blockchain's role in supply chain and real estate tokenization. We'll also be covering an exciting side event during KPW Korea.
Lawler is one of the most selective law firms in the US, representing clients throughout the world from 8 offices across the country, with a focus on merger and acquisition, finance, IPOs, intellectual property, and other regulatory work and litigation.
It's another production of Edge of Company, a rapidly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 tech and culture. Hey, Josh, welcome to Hot Topics. Great to have you on the show with us.
Sure. Great to be here.
Our first topic we're going to dive into today is the rise of non-fungible tokens and the legal challenges surrounding copyright infringement. As the NFT market grows, artists are struggling to protect their intellectual property when they mint their work, and NFTs are further minted without permission. A joint study by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the U.S. Copyright Office found that existing intellectual property laws can address NFT-related issues, making new legislation unnecessary.
However, copyright infringement remains a concern, especially when NFTs are created using copyrighted material without authorization. Josh Lawler, I'm going to pass it over to you. Do you agree with these findings of this study?
No, not really. I don't. I could really legal nerd out on you guys right now. One of the things going on, which is not specific to blockchain, is that the Supreme Court just struck down this thing called the Chevron doctrine, which is over 50 years old, which means there is nobody at the PTO that has been working at the PTO since before Chevron was put in place. And what Chevron did is it basically said for federal administrative bodies, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt in terms of interpreting law, unless you're just completely off the reservation. And that just got struck down about 2 months ago in the Loper case. So I think when the folks at the Copyright Office are saying, oh, we don't need any new laws, they're doing it with the mindset of because we can interpret anything that's vague to our benefit. And they're, in fairness, it's not what the SEC is doing, but they're still thinking we can bridge all the gaps. And that's just not what the law is right now. And the other piece of it is, I think there's a real misunderstanding of how the technology works, which I'll go into really briefly. And you guys know, we all refer to an NFT as if it were the thing that the NFT represents. And it's not. An NFT is a piece of executable software code. And typically, at least in the Ethereum system, whatever it's representing is actually just an electronic file, might be a JPEG, might be a stream, whatever, which is stored somewhere else. It's not actually stored on the NFT. Ordinals are different. That's a whole other kettle of fish, which we'll skip for now. But what most people think of as NFTs don't actually have anything on it. That would be copyrightable, except maybe the software code. So if you're an artist and you've got your art, what you're really doing is you're putting it someplace in a cloud, most likely, whether it's IPFS or whether it's one of the centralized Azure or AWS, whatever it's going to be. And from that perspective, it is regular copyright, and that's fair. And if somebody were to copy that and put it somewhere else, and you have registered it as a copyright, then you've got a copyright infringement action. One of the biggest problems, though, and our firm has run into it plenty of times, is that the copyright registration process is not designed for the scale that people tend to issue art via NFTs at. If you've got 10,000 generative of a particular type of NFT, that's one of the ones that are community oriented, it's about $60 to register your copyright, and you have to do it manually. You have to actually sign something. That just got very expensive. And you can get around the 10,000 separate copyright registrations by calling it a compilation and registering them all under one copyright. But that doesn't really protect you from infringement, because if somebody grabs one of those, it's 1/10,000th of a copyright, and that's going to mess up your damages and all kinds of other stuff. That's one element of it where it doesn't quite work. And there's a lot of details to that also. The other spot that is, I think, really super interesting is the NFT projects that claim to give intellectual property rights to the holder of the NFT. And again, there's two problems with that. One is we don't really know what intellectual property right they're giving. It's not really copyright. Copyright can't be transferred without a physical signature at the Copyright Office. There's that piece of it. You could say it's something like name, image, likeness rights that athletes have, that your Bored Ape or your Moonbird or whatever has got its image and likeness. And there may be something to that. But the problem is if there's 10,000 of them and you run into this question of, okay, how many of the unique traits have to actually be there before I can prove that this is like my name, image, and likeness, and how close do they have to be to each other? There's just a lot of space, and music is similar in that sense. And then you can add to this, it's a little bit of a tangent, but you can add to this the fact that artificial intelligence generated things are not currently copyrightable because they're not a product of a human endeavor. And there's a line that's very fuzzy about when the AI is being used to completely generate something versus when it's so prompt specific that it's more like a tool or a paintbrush and deserves protection. But you combine everything together, and we're really in a brave new world in copyright. I don't agree with their statement. I think that there's actually quite a bit of study and change that needs to happen in the law.
Yeah, you presented a lot of facts that I think a lot of people don't bring into consideration. One, just being the idea of $60 per copyright that you do. And like you said, if you just did 10,000, that's $600K that you're about to do. Most people aren't about to drop that money. And even if you blanket it to specifically go after one specific NFT, like how do you really even protect that side of it? It sounds like things are too blanketed right now and not specific enough. And it sounds like for a more accurate future, things have to get way more specific.
I think they do. And I'm actually very hopeful on this. If you look at our recent history, Digital Millennium Copyright Act is not that long ago, which was a major change. They came up with entirely new things in order to cover the technology. The whole idea of having DMCA agent at some place and having notice and takedown and all that kind of stuff, brand new. That was invented right then. And I'm hopeful this tends to not be a controversial topic. It's mechanical and it's logistics. There's nobody who's really sitting there pushing an agenda. So hopefully they get around to working it. And I think the patent copyright folks, everybody else, don't necessarily like change. And the temptation is just to say, oh, we've got it covered. But they don't.
No, for sure. Another topic that I think is going to continue to evolve is blockchain supply chain. I want to discuss how blockchain technology is not only revolutionizing the supply chain management, but all kinds of aspects of our real world asset world. Coinbase recently published a thought leadership piece about the potential use cases for blockchain when it comes to supply chains. And in the article, it discussed how blockchain technology enhances transparency and trust in the supply chain by providing real-time visibility and secure tracking of goods from production to end consumers. It highlights blockchain's role in verifying product authenticity, ensuring quality control, facilitating supply chain finance, and ensuring regulatory compliance.
So I find this really interesting because supply chain was actually what brought me into the space in 2017. I came from the food tech world and I saw the real benefits of supply chain. We're talking about things like recording transactions in a decentralized manner, reducing the need for third-party verification, trying to mitigate fraud, which is really big in food tech. If anyone's caught that Netflix movie about, the phishing supply chain and how messed up that is, that's a whole other topic though. My question, Josh Lawler, is the juice worth the squeeze at this current moment in terms of integrating blockchain into supply, just based on all the complications and legal considerations?
Yeah, that is a resounding yes, it is. And this is also a subject that is near and dear to my heart because honestly, it's the base for the entire technology. When I explain to people what a blockchain is, or actually really what a distributed ledger is, and why it's such a profound change, the example I usually use to really drive this home is if you go back to the very dawn of human existence, there's a person in a cave counting things like mammoth steaks and buries and stone axe heads. And that's a ledger, and it's a centralized ledger. And if you're the chief of that tribe, you have access to that ledger. And if you're not, then you don't. And having that information is power. And everything from that point forward until our current era is based on centralized ledgers. Who's got the count? Are there two counts? How do I audit the count and verify the count? All of that stuff. And it really is going back to that cave. That is supply chain. That's your stone axe heads. It's your mammoth steaks. As we are in our world, which is now infinitely more complex than back in caveman days, having the ability to trace these things in an immutable way without a lot of intermediaries in between, and having the ability for anybody who has the right access and ability to check on that is huge. And when I say anybody who has the right access and ability, there's a great public watchdog function here. If you look at things like the EU just put in deforestation standards, you look at things like sustainable power and carbon credits, you look at things like, where rare earth minerals are coming from and not being conflict oriented, or for that matter, one of the ones I've focused on, which you just mentioned, is actually ocean caught fish. And how are they caught? Where are they caught? What do they weigh? How are they prepared as soon as they go? And then there's a really fast marketplace in there that's really interesting in terms of how that gets from there to the sushi restaurant, because those fish are very valuable. It's not only worth the squeeze, it's the main thing worth the squeeze. The things like cryptocurrency, that's ancillary, it's a tangent. It's one that people really like because getting rich quick is great, but the real power of the technology is here in the RWA, including supply chain space.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just to echo what both of you said. When I learned about basically having a digital ledger that's decentralized and transparent, that just made perfect sense to me. Like, how many times have I gone to a store and wanted to know, like, where is this source? How did this get here? How did this get in front of me? And then to be able to audit and do that in a transparent way, awesome. Like, it just sign me up. So I agree. Like you said, it's not only worth the squeeze, it's the main squeeze. And if getting behind just that core concept, I think it's going to continue to propel all of the Web3 space forward. But Josh, I think you have another really cool topic for us to talk about next.
Yeah, right on. And by the way, shout out to G Money and what he's doing with proof of authenticity with his clothing line on the blockchain. If you want to see a real world example of this in sort of luxury fashion, check out the 9DCC line there. But moving on to our next topic, which is tokenization on real estate. In recent years, there's been a buzz around tokenizing real estate. We've talked about it in the show. It's definitely picked up some steam. And this is exciting because it means the possibility to also fractionalize real estate, where investors can easily buy and sell shares in real estate, bringing a whole new level of liquidity to the market. The sector is set for a massive leap, with projections showing growth from 3.8 billion in 2024 to 26 billion by 2034, thanks to the digitalization of assets. But as exciting as it is, it also brings up some questions around legal and regulatory issues like property rights and security laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think this is actually one of the most misunderstood parts of the entire space. And it's even right down to something you just said. Putting a piece of property into an entity and tokenizing the shares or equity of that entity and selling them is not tokenizing real estate. That is tokenizing the equity in shares that own real estate, and it might as well own bars of gold or ocean caught fish or whatever the heck it's going to own. That's corporate. And a lot of people are going with that on real estate because it's easy to understand. It's actually not too far off of some of the other topics we talked about where people are just used to doing what they're doing. And this is the standard thing. If you look at a REIT, a real estate investment trust, it's a trust that owns real property that has certain rules about distributing income from that property, and people buy units in that trust, and great. What tokenizing real estate really should be is about title. It's about actually, instead of having a very arcane, messy chain of title kind of system that goes back hundreds of years through county recorders, of which we have 3,140 in this country, it's just on a blockchain. And it's a very easy thing to do conceptually, to have your nonprofit, your government, if it wants to do it, maintaining a blockchain where every property is an NFT, and those NFTs can freely trade. You always know whose wallet the NFT is in. And then those NFTs can also be a proxy for bankable assets for lending and things of that nature. And that actually is very exciting. I think that's huge. And I know that there is actually some progress towards that, both in the United States and abroad. E is very much involved with putting its real property on chain. But I was surprised to hear of a company, and the name's escaping me, unfortunately, but they're working with one of the counties in New Jersey to get those properties on chain because it just makes that much sense because the existing system is ancient. So that'll happen. Once that happens, though, I think in the finance space, it's going to potentially change a lot. I think in the what actually happens in the world space, maybe not so much, because we already have something called joint tenancy or tenancy in common, depending on where you are, where multiple people can own a percentage of the same piece of property. And it doesn't happen very frequently. Usually something that happens because somebody dies and they have it set up in their will. And honestly, it might have been a little bit of an error that it took place because it's a mess. You've got disparate parties that all have a claim to property rights on a piece of real property. And how exactly is that controlled? There are whole law school classes on this. In terms of the fractionalization piece, I think having something akin to a REIT where the units are tokens, great, wonderful, not particularly groundbreaking, no pun intended. But having the real estate itself tokenized, that is very groundbreaking, but I don't think it delivers that fractionalization, unlocking liquidity thing that you guys are looking at.
Yeah, just to speak to that, I've been looking at a ton of different of these types of real estate on blockchain type of opportunities. And what I consistently have seen, most have gone overseas because of the US regulatory questions that are still up in the air. People are wanting to do this here. There are plenty of startups that are approaching it, but the biggest thing that has slowed them down in a lot of ways has been the legal side of things. So obviously you just said there's some things going on in Connecticut. I'm also aware of some other place of people doing stuff in like California and elsewhere, but it hasn't necessarily gotten to the finish line yet. What do you think, or if you have to put out a timeline of when do you think like there will be a turning and we'll have some actual regulation around what that looks like? If you have to like look at your crystal ball into the future, obviously this is just your guess at this. Are we super far away from that, or is that closer than people think?
Yeah, like I said, it's a very misunderstood space, and that interferes with it a great deal. Just to your point, in terms of what people are trying to do, if you're trying to do this without the token being a security, you really have to think really hard about what you're looking at. Because certainly if you're doing equity, you're putting the real estate into equity and tokenizing the equity, that's a financial product. We know what that is. It's a security. And if you're trying to do this, you can comply with securities law as you should. And that's great. Not groundbreaking again, but great. If you're trying to do it as not a security, you really have some issues from a logistical standpoint. If you have anything other than owner occupied residential real estate, it's really hard to get away from the idea that the promoter or somebody is putting efforts in that have to be taken into account in order for the value of that to exist. And whether that's generating revenue and you've got somebody who's property managing, or whether that is raw land and it's just somebody who is going through the process of potentially having that land available for somebody to purchase for sale and it's capital appreciation, there's somebody doing something. And not to get in the Howey test and all the security stuff, but that efforts of others thing, if people are investing in this, expecting a return, and it's based on the efforts of others, that's a classical investment contract security. And as much as we rail against the SEC and work against Howey, that's the way it should be. If you go back into the 20s, the jokes are all, I've got like a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. I've got real estate in Florida to sell you. We want regulation here. Absolutely. To your point, I think blockchain use in the space, that's near term. People are doing it. I think anything that has a really profound effect on how things currently are is probably going to take a lot longer. And again, I think the key to that is that the banks need to change, because the banks provide most of the financing on real property. So if the banks are ready to accept the idea that an NFT is as good as a deed or represents a deed, then I think we're going to have some real change, and it'll be something that, again, I don't think the general populace is going to notice it unless they're buying or selling their house or real property, but it'll make things more efficient. I think it'll certainly make things more efficient on a global basis.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I'm very passionate about the real estate space. So I'm glad I was able to hear it from a legal aficionado as yourself, but also want to dive into our final topic for some exciting things that we have coming up. And I want to turn our attention over to Korea Blockchain Week. And because we have a couple of fun updates. So the first is that rumor has it my co-host Josh is actually hosting a fireside chat with Greg Garga Solano, who is the co-founder of Bored Ape Yacht Club and Yuga Labs. They're going to sit face to face on September 4th. And Josh, what are you guys going to be talking about?
Yeah, thanks Korea Blockchain Week for setting up this really exciting conversation. I'm very honored, and it's going to be fun to really dive in with Greg, who has come back as CEO again, the company that he co-founded and was built around the same time as the start of our show. A lot of history there and a lot to unpack. I'd love to learn from his perspective if and when we'll ever get back to the glory days of NFTs. And I have a lot more there. Josh, any questions you'd like me to ask him?
Oh, yeah. We already touched on it on the IP front. Them stating you have the intellectual property rights to use your Bored Ape for commercial licenses has just got so many legal problems with it. But I don't know that he's the guy who's really the guy to talk to about that. I'll leave it to you. You're much better at interviewing people than I am, certainly.
All right, fair enough. We're also proud to announce that we're a media partner for an exciting side event in the heart of Seoul called BTC Bar. And this is our third year at Korea Blockchain Week. We've made a lot of friends. This is a spot that Richard and I have called home on previous adventures. And it's with our friends at Pizza Ninjas and BitLayer that have teamed up to host this takeover at a fun bar, and it's in the Gangnam district, not too far from our hotel. There's going to be brunches, cocktail parties, all sorts of late night affairs.
Yeah, it's 5 days, and it's going to be in Central Seoul. It's lined up with like Lambos and K-pop stars where they go to party. Like it was nuts, like just experiencing that for the first time last year. You know, I never knew what my idea of what Seoul would be like, but that was just like such a great experience. And for anyone who's listening to this, you want to like learn more about this experience, go follow BitLayer and Pizza Ninjas on social and Discord for the latest details. And you can catch us for a drink if you're over in Korea. And Josh, don't worry, we're going to be recovered in time for our week of networking at Token 2049 when we see you out there a week later.
Right. Yeah, no, that was my biggest concern. You know, one of my great kind of bits of consternation, if you will, is unfortunately every year Korea Blockchain Week conflicts with Burning Man. And I got to go to Burning Man. So I will say if there are anybody listening or watching this podcast who is going to be at Burning Man, I will be at Cosmic Llama 445 and B, and happy to discuss blockchain with any takers.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of blockchain folks there. And yeah, we're trading Desert and Extreme Sun for Saki. And either way, a lot going on in the month of September in this space. And that is a wrap for today's show. We've covered NFT copyright issues, blockchain supply chains, real estate tokenization, and what Josh and Richard will be doing in Korea Blockchain Week, as well as what the other Josh will be doing while we're at Korea Blockchain Week.
We want to give a special thanks to our special guest and practicing lawyer, Josh Lawler. The blockchain world's rapidly evolving and legal frameworks must keep pace to protect and allow innovation. And for everyone listening, what are your burning legal questions for the blockchain space? Please share your thoughts on our socials, and you can always try to reach out directly to Lawler on his social channels for answers to your questions as well.
So stay curious and keep pushing boundaries. Your voice shapes the future. Thanks for tuning in to Edge of NFT Hot Topics today. I'm Josh. I'm here with Richard and Josh Lawler signing off. Stay secure, stay curious, and catch you on the flip side.